You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The aftermath of the Denver Broncos preseason victory against the Minnesota Vikings, a lot of talking points circulating through the social media sphere, but we did a rewatch of the game. We had our immediate post-game reaction following the game, but now we have a little bit more clarity as our observations after the fact of the Broncos victory over the Vikings. We took a look back, and we're going to break it down on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. A fun week ahead as the Broncos prepare for the Seattle Seahawks on Saturday, 8 p.m. Mountain Time. That is going to be a brutal late start, specifically for Broncos fans on the East Coast. But I'm Cody Roark, host of Locked On Broncos, Broncos analyst for the Locked On Network and 9 News, joined alongside by my good friend Sayre, Bedinger, who's also a Broncos analyst for the Locked On Network and 9 News. He's also the site expert of their predominantly orange of the fan-sided network. And Sayre, look, man, I tell you what, after going through and watching the rewatch of the game, I wish I didn't get the Minnesota Vikings broadcast again because the commentary was a little brutal because they would pan away from the game during important plays. But for the most part, I went back and I rewatched the game, and I saw a lot of good things, man. But first off, how you doing, man? Big week ahead. The Broncos, they have some tough decisions coming this week as they have to get ready to trim the roster down by 5 players.
Yeah. No, I'm doing well. Always good to wake up after a victory, even though the preseason wins and losses don't count. It always feels good. It feels especially good after, the team played well. But you're right. There's a lot of stuff coming up this week, a lot of stuff that we can go back and look at from the game on Saturday and really dissect and get into some position battles, things like that. So I'm excited for this week to come at practice. I think the intensity is going to be really ramped up from some guys that need to bounce back from some different position battles, like we mentioned. So it's going to be really good.
Well, the Broncos had a little bit of a walkthrough on Sunday. Yes, the day after the game, and no practice really slated for Monday. Players are expected to come get treatment, watch film, things like that, but no on-field activities expected for the Broncos on Monday. But they will begin practicing and preparation. They will begin practice preparation for the Seattle Seahawks on Tuesday. But outside of that, some deadlines facing on the rewatch, Sayre. Going back, I wanted to take a look at different positions, right? Because when we watch the game, we see the explosive plays, we see where things go wrong. But on the rewatch, you go back, you look at certain positions, certain units, you see things a little differently. Now, there's one guy that really stood out to me, Sayre, that I don't feel like is being talked about enough. I mean, he was demolishing people, and that's Natani Muti. I mean, we've brought him up here on this podcast so many times. We've given him such high praise, and rightfully so. As a guard, I mean, he's just always looking to put somebody in the dirt. And then there were a couple of plays where the outside guy, the outside backer, the D end would try to get inside, and he would just bury them. There was a play that he had helping out Calvin Anderson, and I tell you what, Sayre, it was beautiful. Natani Muti's stock is rising.
And I love to see that. You absolutely love it. This was a guy who, coming out of Fresno State, really the big red flag with him was injuries. We barely ever got to see him play when he was in college, which really stunk because there was one year where he played left tackle, another year that he played left guard, and he was just kind of hit or miss. You never knew if you turned on the Fresno State tape, are you going to see him? It was more likely than not, honestly, that you weren't going to see him. So the fact that we got to see him spend a whole year healthy last year in Denver, which how rare was that for anybody with the Broncos last season? And now we get to see him fully healthy again and just dominating out there. Like you said, this is why a lot of people talked him up as a potential top 50 player in the 2020 NFL draft, because he can do things like this. And I think we saw a lot of really good stuff from him on the pull blocks that he was asked to execute yesterday as well. So that's something that we know he does exceptionally well. And I think if Natani Muti was able to test at the scouting combine last year, if he was healthy enough for that, we already know what he can do on the bench press. I think he threw up like 44 of them. But if he was able to test in all the other drills, I think he would have had one of the highest, relative athletic scores among anybody at the position. He's just a physical freak, and he's really strong, and he's really athletic, and he's fun to watch, man. I mean, not a lot of offensive linemen are just like fun to watch for casual fans, but I think if you just decide on a play, all right, I'm going to watch 52, I think you would legitimately find enjoyment in it.
No, I've had a lot of fun going back and watching. I mean, because there's specific plays depending on where the D line is, or where the defensive lineman is aligned up. And if there's a guy that's on the inside shade of the center and a one tech, he's going to double down and then he's going to get up to the backer. And I tell you what, there's a couple times he buried the one technique, and they got up to the play side backer, pushed him back. I mean, we talk about a guy when you, especially on pulling plays, as you mentioned there, hesitancy sometimes is the killer for a lot of offensive guards. But with Natani Muti, he's so confident. He understands his leveraging, his angles that he has to take to get down the line of scrimmage to either kick out a defensive end or to get up to a corner. I mean, that's what we're really going to see a lot of the Broncos run game this year. We're going to see a lot of that inside pounding guys, double team, get up to the next level, create a hole inside the A and the B gaps, and then pulling out to the outside or the E alley to be able to kick guys out. And Natani Muti, I mean, he is just all go. We saw that in our sample size against the Carolina Panthers last year, against the Las Vegas Raiders in that Week 17 regular season finale. And we saw it so far here in preseason game number 1. So obviously he's a player we're going to continue to watch. His stock continues to rise. But there's another player that I felt like had a really good day. And look, we highlighted a lot of good in our post-game report, but Michael Jamudi also had a really good day, in my opinion. A couple of plays inside the red zone, inside the goal line, knocking passes away. We just see a much more confident Michael Jamudi. And look, he's had a chip on his shoulder since the Broncos have brought in some DBs. What was it that you noticed about Michael yesterday that, maybe gave you a little bit of confidence? Hey, we already know this cornerback room is already loaded, but this is a guy that can play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. I do think he had a really good game, especially that red zone rep where he was able to kind of just easily knock the ball away. They weren't fooling him with that little fade that they tried to pull. And he kind of showed, you want to match me up in one-on-one coverage, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to knock that ball away. You're not going to have, an easy time getting the ball past me. So I think that was really good to see. You hate to talk about guys that were kind of failed in that same regard, but like you think back to like the 2017 selection of Brendan Langley. You talk about the 2018 pick of Isaac Yiadom, and those guys they weren't able to come back from a tough start to their NFL careers, which I think we could fairly say Jamudi had a bit of a tough start to his NFL career last year. I mean, there was a lot of good that he showed in 2020, but there was also a lot of stuff that you want to have those reps back. So It was great to see him come out in that first game and really play confident. And that's huge, I think, for him, and the Broncos are asking him to play multiple positions. It's not like he's just playing outside corner. They're asking him to be, one of Surtain's top backups at that dime defensive back position as well. And we know that in the past they've considered cross-training him as a safety. So really great to see him come out and play confident.
I love to see it from Michael Jamudi, a player we're going to continue to watch as the NFL preseason continues. Really quick, a shout out to Demarie Crockett on the Trinity Benson touchdown pass. It was play action. And look, the casual football observers, they're not going to really look too much into this, but going back and rewatching it, he sold the play action fake from Drew Lock perfectly to the point that it extended the inside backer and not to mention that outside guy with him, which allowed Trinity Benson to come across free. And look, that's exactly what you need. You need a little bit of a 1 second. If you could take a defensive player off track for 1 second, you're going to win that rep if you can execute it and convert. Drew Lock did that. Trinity Benson caught it, touchdown Denver. But selling things like that, it's the little things, Sayre, that makes such a difference in the game of football 11 on 11. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I, we're going to get into a conversation, the position battle tracker. We went back and we looked at all the major position battles that the Broncos have ongoing, and we took a look at the stock report. Who impressed? Who needs to step up to the table? We're going to bring that up coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, folks, let me tell you about BetOnline.ag, one of the sponsors of today's episode of the show. And BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. You can get in on all the action from any sport, whether it's NFL, NHL, MLB, NBA, and all of your UFC and MMA action. Football season is in full swing. Week 2 of the preseason is here, and you can put your money on the line at betonline.ag. You don't have to sit on the sidelines anymore. So I want you to head to the website or use your mobile device today to sign up. And when you sign up for the first time, use promo code LOCKEDON, and that's going to get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Once again, promo code Locked On is going to get you 50% off your first bonus today. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Sayre, let's continue on with today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Just a reminder, Broncos Country, you get this podcast every day in audio format on your favorite audio podcasting platforms. Make sure you follow, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you have time to. Not to mention, if you want to watch us in video format every single day, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell, which rings you notifications anytime an episode is uploaded or that we go live. And make sure you hit the thumbs up button on this video so we can continue to pump it out to more Broncos fans wherever you're at all across Broncos Country. But Sayre, position battles have come under focus here in preseason for this team. And outside of quarterback, we've been keeping our eye on several positions. I wanted to start off here with tight end 3, right? There was a conversation that we've had here on the podcast about, hey, look, Broncos have Noah Fant, Albert Okwuegbunam. You could make the safe assumption that those are the 1 and 2 guys there at that position. We didn't see Albert O yesterday, but there's 4 guys in the running for tight end 3 between Eric Saubert, Sean Byer, Austin Fort, and even Andrew Beck. In your opinion, whose stock rose the most for you?
I think after watching yesterday's game, Cody, it's definitely Eric Saubert. He had a couple of receptions in there, and actually, man, he looked really quick. I was kind of surprised at how fast he was playing. There was one play that I believe was called back. I'm having a hard time remembering because we just watched a ton of different plays, but I believe there was one play that was called back where he broke a tackle, or it was a play that was called dead. One of the passes that he caught, it was called dead, but he actually hadn't been tackled to the ground yet. And after he got, after the whistle blew, he just blazed forward. I mean, I was like, man, they shouldn't have blown that play dead. I want to see how he would have finished that play out because he hadn't gone to the ground yet. But it was really, really good to see him step up. Really good to see those fresh legs out there. The Broncos didn't quite have that kind of athleticism once Albert O went down, and then Noah Fant was kind of hobbled last year. So it was nice having, for at least even in the brief time that Albert O was healthy, it was really nice to have those 2 super athletic tight ends out there. So to see Saubert come out and have a big game like that, I thought was really critical for him.
We saw a lot of 12 personnel yesterday, and really a Broncos in some 2 tight end sets, even using Adam Prentice to help in pass protection. There was one play, and this is what really kind of stood out for me for Eric Saubert, which is why right now, I think, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion alone, I think he is right now sitting in that tight end 3 spot because of what he did in preseason game number 1. Not only did he help out as a blocker and get active there, but as you mentioned, his size. I mean, that play action play by Teddy Bridgewater, the quick dump off, and him getting downfield. Look, he's got some deceptive speed for a guy of his size. I believe he's 6'4", 6'5", if I'm not mistaken. And a guy who can move around like that, maybe become an option in the red zone. I think that's something that the Broncos need. Yes, we love seeing Noah Fant out there. We only saw him for a series, rightfully so. A big year for him entering the 3rd season of his career in Denver. But outside of that, the Broncos need a 3rd option behind those guys, considering Alberto coming off of ACL. Saubert took the lead there. Even Andrew Beck continues to be that guy that impresses me, but it seems like they have Adam Prentice ahead of him right now, really in that fullback role. And like I said, I tweeted it out. He's just commonly just knocking down more than one defender on plays to spring guys free. I mean, really, is there a competition right now between Prentice and Beck? Look, I like Beck a lot. He offers you versatility as a pass catcher, but if we're talking about a strictly blocking standpoint, I think Prentice has the advantage.
I think you're spot on with that, man. Truly, I do. I think Adam Prentice was a guy that we noticed some other reporters kind of starting to talk about him as the training camp, practices progressed, pads went on. All of a sudden now Adam Prentice is a guy you got to watch out for because the pads are on and he's trying to knock somebody's teeth out there. So I think with last year, you saw the Broncos really go away from the traditional fullback. And that's a big reason why Andrew Beck just really wasn't used in the offense. Troy Fumagalli cut during camp or cut right after camp, then comes back and basically takes Andrew Beck's place on the depth chart at the tight end position after being, a little bit cold, just working out for teams and trying to catch on with other teams and et cetera, et cetera. So the fact that Beck didn't play much last year certainly didn't speak well over the course of the offseason, at least in my opinion, to his chances of making the roster as a tight end. I think that you definitely need to see him do some more work at fullback, but you bring in a true fullback like Adam Prentice. And after the draft, I'm thinking like, what are they doing? Like, I thought they were kind of done with that, but maybe Pat Shurmur's thinking to himself, okay, like we actually have to bring this back into the mix because play action has been so effective. And because this is so critical, pass protection is so critical. And you're right. Prentice had a couple of really nice reps in pass protection, obviously did a really good job as a run blocker as well. So I'm excited to go back and dissect his game a little bit more as well, even as we've already rewatched and rewatched and watched other plays and watched other players. He's a guy that I'm really paying close attention to.
Well, let's switch it now to the right tackle position. Now, I don't know if there was necessarily any progress or any separation because the Broncos, 2 guys that they have battling for that right tackle one spot, one of them played left tackle most of the game on Saturday against the Vikings. Calvin Anderson got to start at left tackle, played a majority of the game there at that position. Bobby Massey at right tackle. And then we saw Cam Fleming come in at right tackle, but on the depth chart, the unofficial one, he's listed as the backup to Garrett Bowles. Now, obviously, no Garrett Bowles in this game, but kind of surprising. I really don't have anybody coming out ahead on that. Like I said, I think there's areas that both players can improve on. I don't know if we have a big enough sample size yet to say, okay, hey, this guy has a lead over this guy, because we didn't really get to see Calvin at right tackle in Saturday's game against the Vikings. For me, I'm really calling this one a push.
And I don't disagree with you there. I think it'll be interesting to see, because nobody's really asking Vic Fangio, like, hey, how are you going to approach the right tackle position? And the same way they are with the quarterback position, And so we know Drew Lock starting the first game, Teddy Bridgewater starting the second game, et cetera, but we don't necessarily know what he's planning on doing for this second game at right tackle. So I think the conspiracy theorist in me, Cody, wants to come out and be like, all right, well, if Calvin Anderson started this game at left tackle and Bobby Massey at right tackle, that to me almost indicates that Massey could potentially be the early favorite. Because if Calvin Anderson was the favorite to start, you would think that he'd be out there with the first unit for that first game. That being said, if he comes out and starts the second game, which we don't know if he's going to or not, I think if he does come out and start the second game at right tackle, we could at least go back to the drawing board there and say, all right, I wonder, where they're at. But I think that at worst, it's a push. And at best, if you're Bobby Massey, I think you've got that first start under your belt. That's kind of a notch in his favor, in my opinion.
Yeah, we'll see if Calvin gets to start this week against the Seattle Seahawks at right tackle. Maybe Vic Fangio will approach it kind of like the quarterback competition. It's up in the air. We haven't known that yet. We're obviously going to hear from Vic Fangio a little bit later this week. We'll keep you updated here, Locked On Broncos. One guy that stood out to me, though, I know we talked about Jonathan Cooper, Andre Minch yesterday, outside linebacker 4. I still have Cooper really at that position behind Malik Reed. But outside of that, on the defensive interior, Shamar Steven looked pretty good in the limited sample size we got from him. I mean, obviously his pressure on the interior was enough to force a holding call in the end zone, which resulted in a safety, and then the Broncos would take a 2-0 baseball score type lead. I kind of like what I saw, because it kind of showed me that, hey, maybe the Broncos behind Mike Purcell, they have a guy that they can maybe spell him with that will, I think, have as much of an impact as he does.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about that is that any numbers that you look at from Shamar Steven and his past with the Vikings or Seahawks or whatever, they don't seem to indicate, man, this guy's a great pass rusher. That's the crazy thing. So to see him come out and have one of the more dominant pass rush reps of the entire game from any player that played for the Broncos, I thought was really, really great to see. And we know that Vic Fangio's defensive scheme is so favorable to interior defensive linemen and those guys who excel in that regard. And so I thought it was great to see that from him. Even limited snaps, it doesn't matter. We know that those guys are going to get to play plenty. Shelby Harris, Draymond Jones, neither of those guys has been much more, or maybe even, I don't know if either of them have even reached a 60% threshold in defensive snaps played at this point in their careers. So I think you're going to need that rotation. So to see him come in limited work and do well was awesome.
Well, Sayre and I, we've discussed here in our post-game report and also on today's episode of Locked On Broncos which players have stood out to us that caught our eye on a second watch through. But I also think we need to take a look at players who may need to bounce back this week in order to preserve their roster spot, with cuts coming on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Mountain Time deadline. But before we do that, folks, I'm going to tell you about the two other sponsors of today's episode of the show. That's good friends over there at Built Bar and RockAuto.com. Now, with Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market today, if you need something that's going to give you a little bit of an energy kick as you get out the door to start your day, just take a bite into Built Bar. You're going to love it because the bars are covered in 100% chocolate. They're soft and easy to chew. They have 9 amazing, delicious flavors, including the return of peanut butter brownie. I also like salted caramel and double chocolate. They also have cherry barcia, and they also have lemon flavors as well. So check it out at Built.com. Not only are Built Bars the best tasting protein bar on the market, but they're also the healthiest. I'm a big time health guy. I know Sayre works out a lot, goes to the gym, and we like to have a very healthy intake. And sometimes it's nice to mix in a little bit of a dessert, and that's exactly what Built Bar provides, because the bars are only 17 grams of protein, only 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. That is tremendous value for something that contains 100% chocolate. So go to Built.com today to get your first box of Built Bar, and when you go to checkout, use promo code LOCKED15. That's going to get you 15% off your next order. Once again, promo code LOCKED15 is going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. And our good friends over there, rockauto.com. If you need anything for your vehicle, rockauto.com has everything. They're a family-owned business that's been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years. 20 years of reliable service, and I vouch for them because I have personally used them myself. When I needed a brand new steering wheel cover, and I also needed new floor mats for my vehicle, guess where I went? I went to rockauto.com, even though I have a local auto chain store down the road. I like rockauto.com because the prices are always reliably low, whether you're a professional mechanic or if you're a do-it-yourselfer. They have prices in the range for everybody. Not to mention their catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. You can quickly see all the parts available for your car or truck based on year, make, model, brands, specifications, and even the prices that you prefer. That's why I rock with rockauto.com. And I want you to go to rockauto.com today to check out their website, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On Broncos in there. How did you hear about us box so that they know that we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Now, Sayre, as we get into the fourth quarter action of today's episode of the show, a lot to talk about in regards to some of the changes that are going to be coming up this week. Now, I'm very vocal about it. The NFL, they've implemented some of these new rule changes in terms of DBs cannot tackle low on pulling guards that happened in the Kansas City game. Very frustrating for me that is something we're going to see. Also, the new taunting rule. We didn't see that really come into play for the Broncos in their victory of the Minnesota Vikings. The rule change is kind of frustrating. That's something we'll talk about, but I also want to throw it to you too on players that we feel like maybe need a bounce back week this week if they get the opportunity, because like I mentioned, roster cuts from 90 to 85. The deadline is 2 p.m. Mountain Time on Tuesday. So really, in your opinion, who is a player that stands out to you that really needs a bounce back week if they do make the roster cut this week?
I think one big name is Tyree Cleveland. You know, we have looked at him kind of as a collective fan base over the course of the last 6 months, probably as the favorite to be wide receiver 5, if I can say that. I think that given the additions the team made and just the way that things had shaken out after last year with a clear top 4 at the position, given Cortland Sutton coming back from injury, I would say Tyree Cleveland was kind of the odds-on favorite and pretty much like sharpied in as wide receiver 5. I think everybody kind of expected him to take a step forward. We saw some good things last year. Obviously, he was known coming out of college as a really good special teams player. So it's been a disappointment for him so far in training camp and now into the preseason. I think, early in training camp, he struggled with dropped passes. That was the big issue with him there. Then he gets hurt. He has the backside injury, which that's the first time I've seen that on the injury report, Cody, a backside injury. It makes me, as a parent, it makes me think that, your kid's got spanking or something, a backside injury. But for dropping passes, I don't know how Vic Fangio does that. He's pretty old school, but I don't think he's that old school. But in all seriousness, in preseason game number 1, you come out and you look, he didn't look explosive to me. Just of what I expect from him. I look at him as a true sub 4.4 guy, and he made a bad decision on the kickoff return to come out. I thought that he didn't look explosive on his end around opportunity that he got. So obviously we can attribute some of that to his injury, but at the same time, you're in a dead heat right now with some really, really, really strong candidates to take your spot on the roster. So if the Broncos keep 6 receivers, man, I think that Tyree Cleveland right now is on the outside looking in. If they keep 7, I think he's probably good. But man, if they keep 6, he's got a lot of guys that are competing for his job.
Well, not to mention Trinity Benson's stock is rising. You look at Kendall Hinton, who played pretty much the entire game for the Broncos on Saturday against the Vikings. Loved his effort, some great blocks, just a high motor guy. He didn't have any flashy catches along those lines, but you saw it with his effort. That's one thing I know the coach Azani and the coaches look at is effort in that wide receiver room. And so it's a big week, in my opinion, for Tyree Cleveland. I don't think that he's going to be on the brink of being cut necessarily. I think that there's some other wide receivers that are on the lower end we didn't really get to see much of that probably are in line for that if, in fact, the Broncos have to free up some roster space. But I do think that Tyree Cleveland has to have a bounce-back week this week against the Seattle Seahawks, regardless of where he plays, who he plays with at quarterback. It's going to be a big game for Tyree Cleveland, in my opinion, because if he performs, I think you make a case for another week. Hey, all right, he has a chance to make this roster. But if he has another performance where it just doesn't stand out, there's nothing that flashes, I think that his future as a Denver Bronco at least is kind of put into question. So there's that. Me, I'm going to go with 2 inside linebackers, Sayre. And look, Peter Calambae and Josh Watson, I felt like didn't have a great game for the Broncos. Missed tackles, not trusting their technique, and just, it led to a couple of big plays, a couple of big runs there. One thing we saw with Justin Sternad is there was one play too. He comes up, he reads run because of the play action. He makes contact, loses the fullback, but his effort and his speed, he recovers, and he still prevents a first down from happening. There's a chance that Josh Watson has to make a stick on a running back. He lunges, completely misses. Running back gets to the outside on the right side. Same thing with Peter Calambae. I just didn't see enough that says, hey, I don't know if these guys are safe coming into a week to week, which, I had higher expectations for a guy like Josh Watson.
Yeah, I did too, especially the opportunity that they got. I wasn't sure why Alexander Johnson wasn't playing in this game. I knew that, Josie Jewell with his injury, obviously not going to be playing, but I think that Josh Watson got a golden opportunity with Vic Fangio and the coaching staff deciding to give Alexander Johnson the week off. And I didn't think that Josh Watson really took advantage. I think he had that one play that was solid in coverage. Other than that, the missed tackles really were kind of the only negative side of what the Broncos did in this game as a team. And obviously Calambae as well. You talked about missed tackles, but then also a missed opportunity to create a turnover. We talked about that after the game. Pat Surtain tips a ball in the air. It falls right into Calambae's lap, literally, and hits the ground, unfortunately. So unfortunately, he was in the right place at the right time. You just got to make the play. And those plays, whether they're made or not, could be the difference between you making the roster or not. And for a guy like Calambae, whose value is primarily special teams, you've got to go out there and you've got to show that you can contribute to the defense if your number is called. And so I wondered about either of those guys. Did they show enough? And right now the Broncos have 3 linebackers on the team that will probably end up making the team. They may need to start scouring the waiver wire or free agency and see if they might need to bring in some reinforcements there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And especially with the uncertainty about Baron Browning's status right now, still on the PUP list. Obviously, we'd like to see him get into the mix, but I don't think that's going to happen here in the preseason. It does allude to what Vic Fangio talked about last week, that guy, he's behind. And we didn't see much of Jamar Johnson yesterday either. So that was kind of disappointing. But then again, it goes back to what Vic had said, that he's not going to put anybody out there that's not ready, because not only that, it could lead to a big time play. It also could lead to a player getting hurt, or not knowing his assignment could also lead to somebody else getting hurt. So I understand that. So obviously a big week, Broncos country. Let Sayre and I know in the YouTube comment section which players you feel like really need to step up and rebound this week if they survive roster cuts, as the Broncos go from 90 to 85 by 2 p.m. Mountain Time on Tuesday. We also have some fun news as we're going to announce that Tim Jenkins is going to be joining us this week as a guest appearance to talk about the Broncos quarterback competition. Tim Jenkins obviously does a lot of stuff with quarterback work with Jenkins Elite, with high school, collegiate, and professional athletes. Looking forward to hearing his insight. He went back and he watched the tape. What does he think about Pat Shurmur, Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater, and maybe what the Broncos can do to have either of these guys be successful in 2021? We're going to hear from Tim on Tuesday's episode, Lockdown Broncos. But with that said, Broncos country, make sure you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. Also, your favorite audio podcasting platforms. If you have friends or family who are Broncos fans, tell them that make sure that they lock in at the Lockdown Broncos podcast for daily exclusive news, content, and coverage of all things orange and blue. I'm Cody Roark, host of the show, speaking for my amazing co-host, Sayre Bedinger. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.